Looks like we have a few more people joining, so I'll give folks 1 more minute and then we'll get started. All right, well, welcome everyone to our virtual town hall meeting. My name is Judith Montenegro, and I'm the program director for the Latinos in the Deep South, a program by the Latino Commission on AIDS. While we wait for everyone to join, I think everyone is muted. Luis, can you confirm if everyone's muted?
Yes, everyone is muted.
Do you mind unmuting your lines?
We will eventually unmute everybody.
Okay. So we just wanted to get a sense where everyone was from. So if you could use the chat function and just share, what states you're from, that would be helpful, just so we can learn who's on the call with us today. All right, so it looks like we have folks from Illinois, New York, Florida, Maryland, Tennessee, New York, some more folks from Florida, North Carolina, my hometown, Georgia, Texas, DC, it looks like we have some folks from Massachusetts, California, Wisconsin, welcome. South Carolina. So we have folks from, it looks like, several states represented. So welcome everyone. And if as you join, if you can just share what state you're from, that would be great. Thank you. So before we start our conversation today, I'd like to make some brief annotations to help center our conversation in our virtual town hall. In recent years, the South has transformed and become the epicenter of the HIV epidemic, where not only folks in the South were more likely to become infected with HIV, but they are now dying at higher rates than any other region in the US, even after we adjust for things like age, gender, transmission category, and population density. This year, we also learned that more than 50% of new diagnoses are occurring in 48 counties, Washington, DC, and San Juan, Puerto Rico, where 23 of those counties are also located in the regional South. States with high rural HIV infection rates also include a majority of states in the South like Kentucky, Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, and South Carolina. I would like to recognize that the African Americans continue to be heavily impacted by HIV in the US, but especially in the US South. And so as we start our town hall today, I'd also like to acknowledge and honor the work being done by African American communities to address the epidemic. And now I'll turn it over to Luis Mares to continue our town hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this important conversation. I am Luis Mares, the Director of Community Mobilization at the Latino Commission on AIDS and coordinator of the National Latino AIDS Awareness Day. Today, we have 3 panelists from different parts of the country to share their views and opinions about the national plan to end the HIV epidemic in America by the year 2030, the challenges and opportunities presented by this plan to our community. The panelists are Bambi Salcedo, President and CEO at Trans-Latina Coalition from California, Oscar Raul Lopez, Director of Education at Valley AIDS Council from Texas, and Guillermo Chacon, president of the Latino Commission on AIDS and founder of the Hispanic Health Network from New York. Each one of the panelists will have 5 minutes to share the views on this topic. This will be followed by 30 minutes open for questions, answers, and comments from our participants. To the panelists, please be aware of the 5-minute time limit. I will remind you when you're reaching your 5 minutes. I understand that our first panelist, which is supposed to be Bambi Suseo, having some problems to log in. So we will start with Oscar Lopez from Valley AIDS Council from Texas. So Oscar, thank you very much. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Good. So my work is largely taking place on the U.S.-Mexican border in Texas, in what is known as the Rio Grande Valley. And our population down here is about 98% Latino. And of those, a very large portion of it are individuals who are undocumented. I think one of the challenges that we're facing in my community, and I think the same can be said for many of your communities across the country, is that it's hard to imagine an effective HIV/AIDS strategy coming out of this current administration while they present this supposedly with desire to end this epidemic, but at the same time, on the other end, they're doing everything they can to make to criminalize immigrants and to make sure that these same immigrants aren't accessing services. When President Trump suggested that anyone who accesses basically any service that is considered a public service, whether it be food stamps, whether it be a public health clinic, that it would jeopardize the residency status, the residency applications for their relatives, the people living in their household. We immediately saw the effects of this as people were beginning to fall out of care, missing appointments, feeling nervous about coming in and asking for help and assistance. On the other side of this is that, at least in our community, ICE agents are set up across the region. We are a region of 1.5 million people, 3 counties, and it's not uncommon to see ICE agents and Border Patrol agents walking through soccer fields and baseball games and at school events, outside of supermarkets and churches. So this also keeps people from coming in for care. So it's wonderful that we want to bring an end to HIV and to ensure that there's no new infections. But in order for that to happen, people have to access care, have to know about education, have to access PrEP, for example. And if they're afraid of coming out of their homes for fear of deportation, then we're not going to end this as soon as they suggest that we will. I'll pause there and let someone else jump in.
For your contribution on this topic. I guess we will continue with Guillermo while we're still waiting for Bambi to join. Guillermo, welcome. You can continue now.
Hi, everybody. This is Bambi Salcedo with the Trans Latino Coalition. Apologies for the trouble trying to log in. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Bambi. Thank you very much for joining us and participating on this.
Thank you.
You can go ahead now with your participation.
Me, Bambi? Me? Okay.
Yes, Bambi, you.
Yes, hi. Well, first, thank you so much for the leadership to, put this very important gathering together. I think, what is important for us to understand when it comes to trans communities and particularly trans Latinas, right? Like how we're going to be able to eradicate the epidemic in our communities. And as we know, the issues continue to be the same. The social issues that need to be addressed specifically for trans communities is really going to be a key. I know that, over time, we have been talking about, the social determinants, but I don't think we have figured out how we are going to include social determinants into HIV prevention and ultimately eradication. So what we would obviously, one of the things that we as a community have been proposing and arguing about is that if we don't really address the root cause of the social issues of our community, then we're not going to be able to eradicate HIV in our communities, particularly trans populations, and even more so when it comes to trans Latino communities. And so I think it's important that we really look at how we're going to address those issues, that we are obviously, that we plan and that we are strategic about how we do those, how we obviously do those efforts. But also, we know that without an intentional investment into our community, things are not going to happen. We know that there are many amazing and beautiful people who are well-intended, but, they don't have the resources. They want to help, but they don't know, one, they may not know how, and two, they may not have, those resources. But we know also that there are people who also understand the needs and issues, and these are obviously our leaders, our elected officials who do have the power to move, resources around. And so what we need to do is to make sure that, these individuals who are influential and who have power really shift the way they think and the way they do the work for our communities. And obviously, I'm open for any questions if people may have.
Thank you very much, Bambi, for your valuable opinion and comments on this national plan. So, Guillermo, now you can go ahead. Guillermo? Guillermo?
Your line may be muted, Guillermo.
Oh, hold on a second. I don't know. Just a second. It is. Guillermo.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Apologies. I was saying that it's close to 100 people in this opportunity, and thank you, Bambi. Thank you, Oscar, and both Luis and Judy. Number one, early February, all of us, saw the news that it was announced this plan to end HIV in America. And to me, the one important thing that we need to highlight is that has been rolled out the following day at the highest level within HHS, that is the federal agency that coordinates different key agencies that will be rolling and implementing this plan, especially the CDC, HRSA, NIH, but again, coordinated within HHS, Health and Human Services. And that's one important issue. Number two is that it will be a plan that will be, I think, an opportunity for us to, again, raise the issue of how serious the HIV epidemic is still in the context of many, many other health issues impacting our communities. Third, as we speak, is a big meeting going on in Seattle, the so-called CROI conference that is very, very medical heavy in content, but also several presentations have been delivered, and I encourage all of us in this webinar to check it out, the presentation, because it's a lot of information, especially one by Anthony Fauci, that is a very important federal figure and a global leader when we talk about HIV. And also, I think in terms of this plan, this upcoming National HIV Prevention Conference in Atlanta will be another important opportunity for us to learn more. And I'm saying all of this because we're learning as we speak, the overall framework of this plan is to intensify by basically, the idea of testing people, treat people, protect people, meaning an area of prevention, and also to respond to the needs of folks. Now, one important thing that I want to remind all of us in this space is that 48 counties will be the priority, plus Washington, D.C. and San Juan, Puerto Rico. And I believe that is crucial to highlight that among these 48 counties and these two territories, many of these states within these counties are rural counties. And I think both Oscar and also Bambi mentioned that we are in all these counties and communities. And for that reason, I truly believe that the timing for us, and this is the big opportunity I believe for us, is to make visible, number one, the impact of our communities, especially gay, bi, trans, and cisgender Latinas, but also, to break the invisibility of the impact. If you check right now the data that was released a few days ago by CDC, the only population that see an increase is Black, young, and Latinos, Black, young, Latino, gay and bi, and trans are heavily impacted with new infections. And again, I truly believe that the essential piece to learn about this plan is what is known as the President's budget request, federal budget request for 2020, that will be released in the next few weeks, that will tell us what will be the resources allocated to implement this plan. Again, I truly believe that from my perspective, and I'm sure from my other peers and colleagues, stigma is still a big issue. The homophobia and transphobia is real, but we need to take opportunity and bring in a very proactive way how to change the narrative and engage the communities, as Bambi and Oscar mentioned, that bring unique challenges. And never forget, the inclusion of Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. With that, I pause for the next section of Q&A, I believe.
Could I add something, Guillermo?
Oscar?
Yes, please. Can I add something as well?
Sure.
I think, and Guillermo touched on this, and that is that we work with populations, many of whom are not out of the closet, who are not pride-filled, if you will. And so in order to get the best care they can get and get the preventative messages, medications, and treatments that they need to keep them from contracting HIV or even STIs in the first place, their physicians, their primary care provider, needs to know about their sexuality, what they're doing, who they're doing it with. But as an example, we collected 900 surveys during our Pride celebration last June. And of those 900 folks who were LGBTQIA+, only 25% of them were out to their landlords, to their primary care physicians, and to their employers. Because many of the people in our communities, regardless of what cities and regions we're in, still are part of a very religious community that is not okay with homosexuality or anything that deviates from heterosexuality. So we have to find a way to empower people, make them safe and secure in their own skin so that they can find their voice and ask for what they need and express what their needs and desires are.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Oscar, for this comment, and thank you, Guillermo, for your input in this conversation. So now we're going to open the floor for comments, questions, and answers from the participants. For that, you guys can either write it in the chat or you can raise your hand, and I will unmute you so you can ask your question. And with the help of Judy, we'll be able to read questions in the chat. There's a comment from Christina Collins. In our area, through RW, which apparently is the Rose Women's Health Project, we successfully serve many undocumented HIV-positive clients. Our PrEP clinic also serves at least one undocumented. It is terrifying for them, But getting the word out to this population is not reinventing the wheel. That's a comment. Any comment about this, Bambi, Oscar, or Guillermo?
Oscar, you want to take the first round?
So the question is that their PrEP clinic also serves at least one undocumented?
Yeah, it seems that there are some challenges in serving the documented population because they are very terrified of accessing the services.
I think we have to make sure that our paperwork makes it very clear that we're not asking whether or not they're a U.S. citizen. I find that many clinics around the country still ask that question, and it's not necessary. The second thing is that I think it's time that most of us, whether we like it or not, put up signage that says that we will not discriminate based on a variety of things, but especially country of origin and citizenship. And that, you know, we are supportive of anyone, whether they be documented or undocumented, immigrant or not, because we can't remain silent and wait for them to voice anything. We have to put ourselves out there. I would even go further and say that we have to make sure that we alert ICE and the Border Patrol and the police what is private property and where they can and cannot go to. Because in many cases, we've seen Border Patrol agents walking into clinics. And just walking through there is enough for them to send the fear of God through people. So making sure they understand that that's private property, they're not allowed.
Yeah, and I will add, thank you, Oscar. I will add, this is Guillermo Chacon, that I think it's important for all of us in this conversation, you know, that more than ever, we need to do the extra effort to collaborate, to coordinate efforts with our peer providers in our cities and our counties and our states, engage also at the state level, you know, and when it's possible, obviously, in the territories, the folks that we need to educate in them that, you know, by the current environment that is very, very xenophobic, meaning promoting fear for immigrants, do not help us to really, you know, bring these people into care, bring these people into prevention services, and we will never be able to, you know, accomplish the goal of the plan to end HIV in America if we don't include everyone that is in the United States. And the other piece that I would also remind that, you know, all of us that are public health dedicated workers, we also need to be the best ones, the best ambassadors, again, to trying to diffuse and educate the healthcare providers. And as Oscar and I'm sure Bambi and many of you in this space know that, you know, it's always hard because we need to be educating and motivating people to understand that public health do not discriminate. We need to engage everyone, and especially when we talk about HIV, that is a preventable disease, we must reach everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillermo. Bambi?
Yeah, and I also, this is Bambi. I also want to add that, you know, I know that oftentimes funding is restricted, and depending on the locality where people may be, but also you can actually like reach out to the pharmaceutical directly, and you can, you know, potentially get support in that regard, and just, you know, say that you're supporting this specific population. And that way you can just, you know, do that in your own way, basically. So you will not be restricted to any, you know, type of, I guess, reporting mechanisms to any entities or the local health department or whatever that may be. But rather just, you know, get the support directly from the pharmaceutical, and then, you know, just, I guess, adapt, but however you think the service will work best for undocumented individuals in your locality.
Thanks, Bambi. We have a question. Marco Torrealba, I'm going to allow you to ask a question directly. Marco, you can talk now. Marco?
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hello, Marco. We hear you. What's your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Let me see. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes. My question is: I work in South Florida. Am I to relate on technology, like a website or an app where people can at least facilitate like some data, and then you can contact them and provide some kind of transportation That's what we do here. I mean, we don't have like the same probably aggressive reality towards immigrants, but people are super afraid to go to a care center and get deported or get any questions that they cannot answer. So for us to rely on technology has been like a jackpot at some point for just a year organization. So have you ever think about to relay, or how you see technology playing like a success or another success game card on this reality?
Well, I like to share with you that by the way, as we are facing the biggest technological revolution and communication revolution, I truly believe that we need to, all of us as a provider, dedicated individuals in our respective cities, states, and counties and territories, it's essential to begin to embrace the breakthroughs on technology. We right now at the Latino Commission on AIDS did a partnership with a private company that is one of the leaders on telemedicine. And again, we always concerned about how we reach rural areas. And you can go and drive to some areas where the individual have, an Android or an iPhone that could access services. And again, I think the innovation has to also kick in. This whole conversation about that has been in all the media outlets, digital and print, allow us to push, some hard issues that the plan might not be designed to address, but we need to bring it to the table. And I believe innovation will be a way to reach not only those 48 counties in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C., but also, some suburban and especially rural areas.
Thank you, Guillermo. Oscar Bambi?
I mean, I think it's been covered. I'm very curious to make time for the question that came up about how do we address the community's resistance to engaging with the current administration? Is that possible, if you're comfortable?
Yes.
Because I think all of us are dealing with this, not only from our colleagues, our employees, the community we serve, about a sense of disbelief that this president of all presidents would be coming up with a plan to end what we know as the HIV epidemic by 2030. I myself am taking it with a grain of salt, but regardless of what I think of the administration, I have to believe that we will be better off with any progress that we make. And considering where we started with the Office of AIDS Policy being closed, with our losing an AIDS czar, not having one replaced, with the members of FACHA resigning and being dismissed, this is a step in the right direction, whether we like who is making those steps or not. And I think we have to remind our consumers and those that we serve that at the end of the day, every president serves a 4-year term. If they're lucky, 8 years. And we have to prepare to move the needle forward one way or another. And so we're in there, we're in the fight, and we're hoping to make a difference regardless of who's in charge.
I will add to that, this is Guillermo Chacon, that we need to acknowledge that it's difficult times, what we're going through for the last 2 years. I think, if you go to different organizations that track, there have been an increase on hate crimes in the U.S. and the territories. But I will echo what Oscar just said, is we need to always put public health first and make accountable whoever is in office, in our cities, in our counties, in our state, or in the White House, the highest elected position in the nation. But again, also I want to remind all of us that within HHS, Health and Human Services, within the Centers of Disease Control, within HRSA, Health Resource and Service Administration, we have partners that are dedicated in public health officials with a lot of limitations, because let's always remind ourselves that, the healthcare or the public health infrastructure is one component is government, but the other big component is private. The other component and essential and fundamental is community. And when we say community, it's about each individual that we need to honor, and always protect, by all means, because at the end of the day, the only way that we make the difference is one person at a time. And again, we need to be mindful. Like, for example, the National Republican Committee, they already select Charlotte, North Carolina, I believe, for their upcoming convention next year's. The Democrats are still debating, but that all those political events will happen wherever we are engaged or not, in terms of advancing and bringing relief to those communities most impacted by HIV, hepatitis, STI, and other conditions. And for that reason, I think we need to be mindful to be proactive and propose, very specific things that will be centered around the community realities and social determinants of health, and fighting stigma and discrimination. I think it's difficult, but it's needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Guillermo.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think we have to understand that the issue is bigger than ourselves, right? Like, we really have to think and for, center the people who are most affected at the center, right? And I think that it's also an opportunity, right? Like, looking on the trans perspective, right? It's an opportunity for all of us to really, like, organize and really be strategic, as Guillermo was saying, right? Like, how we're going to do things. We know that trans people continue to be targeted for a multiplicity of issues, but we also know that trans women in particularly are the ones who are most infected and impacted by HIV. And so how we as a community are going to rally around, centering these individuals and voices and partner with those who do have the ability to really shift things for us. Whether, the administration that is really dictated by the person who is, in the White House right now, that's one thing. But, whether it's, whatever plan is going to happen, it's going to happen. But I think we can definitely influence how things are going to be done, as Guillermo says. So I think it's also an invitation for us to really be inclusive of the most marginalized and the people who are most impacted and affected by this disease.
Thank you, Bambi. There is a comment from Erica Lessem. She says, I wanted to add to Guillermo's mentions of the latest incidence data from CDC. Incidence race among Black, gay, and bisexual men is relatively stable, but increased 30% for Latino, gay, and bisexual men. So I think we really need to make sure that the CDC will do something differently to address this specific group, especially given the attacks from this administration. There is an Act Now Ends AIDS coalition meeting taking place in Atlanta on March 18, and they are trying to get the CDC Director, Robert Redfield, to address the coalition and answer questions. So everyone is welcome in person or to call in. They really love to ensure Latinx community leaders are represented. Whoever is interested, they can email Jeremiah Johnson for more details at jeremiah.johnson@treatmentactiongroup.org, and she's grateful for this important conversation.
Thank you for that comment. May I, Luis, say something quickly? I truly think that meeting is important, and just for everybody in this call, we were having also a conversation, leadership of throughout the U.S. of Hispanic Latinx are meeting with leaders of DHAP, and we will ensure also join the 18, many of us at that meeting at the Act Now and AIDS Coalition, who, we are proud members, and recognize, the leadership of this coalition to also advance, across all communities, an inclusive agenda to respond. Now, the data that is highlighted in this comment is 30% increase for Latino, gay, and bi. And I think that's alarming. But also when you read that report, also highlight young, Black, gay, and bi, and also trans communities heavily impacted. And for that reason, I think many folks, that are connected with NLAAD and Latinos in the South request for us to put up something together to begin the conversation. Because again, as soon as we learn more, we will also will be calling for another conversation, more driven to see what we can do in terms of the current calendar 2019-2020. But I want to also ask all of us in attending this call, that is again like close to 100 folks, to please help to break down this information and inform the people that you serve, the people that you work, because this is about engagement. And I believe it's nothing more important that if we don't see a Black person in a meeting, if we don't see an Asian person or a Latino person, a Latinx person, or a white and Hispanic, that we need to ask for to be included and to be invited, because it's about all of us that we're going to be able to make the difference in our communities.
Okay, there is a question from Jeton Ademach. How can the HIV community navigate the internal political tension between engaging with President Trump's plan on one hand, while also dealing with a widespread community resistance to engaging with this administration in any way or the other hand?
I believe that's the conversation that we just had, Beto.
Yeah.
I mean, Luis,
okay.
Oscar, I think took the first round, and Bambi and I.
Yes.
I will only add one thing that I think is crucial for us, and is to follow, the details. And one important detail coming up, is gonna be the White House budget request for fiscal year 2020. Because has been promised in CROID, the Conference for Retrovirus and Opportunistic Infections in Seattle, Washington. One of the main presenters mentioned that will be new dollars. And I think this is important for us to understand that, in order to move forward, it's about resources. And I always believe that, you show your colors when not only what you say, but the actions that you take. I think this is very important.
Okay, we have a person who's gonna ask. I'm gonna allow Alan Timothy Lunsford Stevens to talk right now. Just a second. Okay. Alan.
Alan, can you unmute your line, please?
I'm here.
Okay, great.
Oh, good.
Okay,
Perfect.
now, perfect.
Okay, sorry, the Zoom is not working right with my deaf relay. Okay. What I really appreciated what you said, Guillermo, and also what Oscar said. And what I was thinking was Guillermo, CEOs of Latino organizations, is there any way we can put a technical media and print campaign of awareness, and then reach out to professionals in the media who are Latino and get them put in magazines? We know we can get them put in Paz magazine and things like that, but let's go into mainstream magazines with a campaign to raise awareness about Latino, gay and Black men, young Black men, and trans.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for your question. I think this is a challenge that we have, Valley Ace Council, Trans Latina Network, and many other organizations that are led by Latinos, Latinas, and Latinx. It's always a desire for us to try to because it's about volume, right? It's about how we reach mainstream media, because by reaching mainstream media, we begin to be less invisible. And like, for example, that report that I mentioned in the folks from Treatment Action Group also highlight, it was not really reported, the right way. And again, it's always a challenge and one of the most difficult things. Many of us have campaigns in our cities and our region, but I agree with you. We need a more strong national campaign that highlight the terrible situation that young, Black, Latino, gay and bi and trans are being impacted by HIV. When we have all the tools, many tools to prevent the spread of HIV. And my promise will be to you, Alan, is that we will continue. And this is one of the proactive things that we can do. And I know that by coming together, we are able to, share not only knowledge, but also opportunities. Just let me give you an example. One of our board members approached The Guardian, is a very well-known and respected global publication, and did a profile about the impact on Latinos right after the State of the Union speech. And I think, those opportunities, when I was saying before that, I know it's painful dealing with somebody that promote, and stigmatize communities, but at the same time, it has to be a motivation for all of us to raise the voices and make visible those that are invisible.
Okay, there is a question from Edwin Corbin Gutierrez. What are the two top line asks that we should advocate for in the federal administration plan?
Excellent question.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear it.
What are the top two line asks that we should advocate for in the federal administration plan?
This is Guillermo. Number one, go ahead, Bambi.
No, go ahead. I'll wait.
Okay, I think the number one that I will say is that the resource allocation has to go to Black and Latino, Latinx, and LGBTQ led organizations. If we want to have a serious impact, we have to do a better job to engage those communities directly impacted. Ask number one. Ask number two, this plan must embrace a strong campaign to reduce stigma. Zero homophobia, zero transphobia, zero xenophobia, because we will not be able, again, to reach, the goals for the next 10 years from this plan's perspective. I know that in many other counties and states are also plans that are all already underway, but on this case, we will not be able to reach the goals if we exclude people.
Hi, this is Bambi. I mean, I think, definitely we need to understand that the needs are great of our community, right? And as much as we want to prioritize a couple of things, the reality is that there are multiple things that we need to really talk about and we really need to address. And obviously, there won't be a solution to the process if there's not a well-intended resource allocation to address those needs. And we have to also look at, HIV and AIDS in our communities and how our communities are impacted on a broader aspect, right? We know that, we know that high impact prevention obviously works. We know that there are different ways and methods that work, but how can we really intentionally implement some of those methods in our communities and the ones who are most impacted? So I definitely agree with, there's two priorities that Guillermo mentioned, but I think, how do we really look at the broader aspect of HIV and the impact that HIV is in our communities for us to be able to address those issues. So really, I'm going to say just for us to be strategic, obviously for all of us to be unified and understand what is the actual message that and our actual priorities that we want collectively, and how those are going to be addressed.
I would also add that one of the best things that's happened to us in many years is the access to PrEP. The challenge for those of us serving Latino communities, with especially I would think MSM and trans Latinas, is that our people in general are not accustomed to still taking medication for something they don't have. And there's a resistance about that. There's also the humbling aspect of coming in for services and saying, I don't have insurance, I can't afford this, and asking for help. And even though the programs are set up to help offset the cost so that anyone, regardless of income, can access PrEP, it takes on a different, I guess it looks differently for those people who aren't used to, have been taught not to ask for what's so-called a handout. So we have to look at how we market and what are the plans for the federal government and even for the pharmaceutical companies to roll this out, because so far everything that we've seen, at least on the border, and when we travel, to other parts of the country that is targeted to Latinos, it's Latinos that don't look like our people, and it's Latinos who look like they have insurance, and it's Latinos whose primary language is English because it's an easier sell. But for those of us who are working with Spanish monolingual individuals, PrEP is life or death, and we need to figure out how do we get that message across to our communities, even if the folks at the national level aren't doing it yet.
Yeah.
Thank you. One more question before we continue with the next part from Alejandro Lopez in Atlanta. He says, I noticed in Metro Atlanta, since most of the programs are focused to youth and the African American community and not the Latino community. He wants to help gain access to the Latino Hispanic community. What advice can you give him?
Well, for Alejandro, it's important that we need to somehow get engaged on the, I believe Atlanta is under Fulton County jurisdiction, and then to, begin to connect with other organizations. We will, if you send us your email, we can, our program in Latinos in the South will follow up with you. But one of the things that we want to do is to begin to connect more with the county or state planning process, because we need to ask and make sure that, when somebody's saying that it's going to reach people of color, that, Asians are reached, Latinos are reached, Native folks are reached, depending where you are, And as Oscar was saying, either, if you don't speak English very well, that the messenger must speak Spanish very well. And not only that, but also if you are in North Carolina and you are Mexican and you are from Honduras, that you're familiar with those countries of origin, because you're not going to be able to connect, and also if you're not are sensitive enough to connect, and I know Trans-Latina Coalition give webinars, to prepare people, to better engage with the beautiful trans community and so on. Pero quiero decir unas palabras en español porque alguien lo preguntó, que si está el Departamento de Equidad de Salud del CDD en este webinar. No sabemos, pero vamos a investigar. Y segundo, que los esfuerzos de investigación para involucrar a todas las comunidades es un esfuerzo constante. No todos los reportes federales reportan el impacto en las comunidades trans, y es una batalla que vamos a seguir dando. Basically, a question was: is anybody from the equity approach office of the CDC was present in this webinar? We don't know, but we will review those that are attending. And also, the other question was about the reporting of trans data, at the federal level. That's an ongoing battle that we're having. But those comments, I wanna just add.
Thank you. Okay, so we have gone a bit over the 30 minutes by now because of the time constraint. We will have to end this part here. We're not finishing yet, but you can contact our panelists directly, or either Judith or me with your questions, and we will redirect the questions to them. Before we finish, so we may have a lot of progress in the fight against this epidemic since the 1980s. There is still, as we can see, a lot to do to reach our common goal to end it. So now we have the means to do it. We have a screening and testing to identify those living with HIV unknowingly. We have rapid initiation of treatment that improves the outcome and prognosis of the people living with HIV. We have biomedical prevention techniques such as PrEP and PEP that helps reduce the number of new infections. And we have viral suppression and U equals U that reduces the risk of transmission to zero. With all this combined, we have a powerful tool to help us end the epidemic in our country. But we have yet to make all these resources available to the most vulnerable population and the most affected communities. This initiative, the Plan to End HIV in America, proposes to target the 48 highest burden counties, Washington, D.C., San Juan in Puerto Rico, and the 7 states with a substantial rural HIV burden. We are glad to see among the almost 100 attendants today, several of you coming from these counties and states to participate in this important conversation. So if we are located in any of these regions, we should stay engaged with our local network, Department of Health, service providers, and community-based organizations, and work together towards this common goal, increasing access to all these measures among the population that is the most affected and vulnerable. Before finishing, I also would like to remind you all about National AIDS Awareness Day. On October 15, a day to create awareness among our Latino community, to promote HIV testing, and to share information and education about ways to prevent and treat HIV. Please join us and host an NLAAD event around October 15. We will soon have more updates on this year's campaign. And before we end this webinar, do we have any last comment or statement from our panelists? We have a minute for each one.
La mera Bambi.
Bambi?
I'll jump in if you want while Bambi comes on.
Sure, definitely.
Go for it. Go for it.
Oscar, I'd like to say that things might get easier, but I don't believe it quite yet. So I would say stay focused, diversify how you work with the community. I think if you want them to trust you, they have to see you marching for immigrant rights. They have to see you providing care for the undocumented who are sheltered and not being able to come out. They have to hear you on the news speaking out on behalf of Latinos and immigrants. And I think those smaller steps all lead to creating a sense of security, a sense of trust between the community and the service provider, especially if that service provider is working for an organization that may not be seen as Latino specific. So start with that, and keep up the good faith. And let's as hard as it is for me, I'm going to try and be more optimistic because the opposite of that is not a pleasant situation.
Bambi back?
No.
Okay, a couple of things very quickly. One, let's promote innovation. We need to think and act outside the box when we talk especially about prevention and how to work to offer safe space, especially for our LGBTQ Latinx community. Number two, we need to connect with other organizations, with other networks. The stronger we are when we come together, and it's a lot of lessons to learn from white non-Hispanics, Blacks, Asians. The Latino Commission on AIDS is a very successful organization because we learn from other communities. And also I want to request all of us to increase the communication, internal and external. And when I say external, it's about Alan's point about the media and communication and social media, because it's a powerful tool, but we need to be mindful how we do it. And finally, I say thank you to each of us and each of you, because we are committed for the wellness and well-being of our communities. And this is not an easy journey. Let's remind ourselves that we need to support each other. Self-care is important in order to provide care to others. And my final point is that I know deep that we will be able to take advantage if we, embrace and support each other for a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bambi. Thank you, Oscar and Guillermo, for sharing your views on the National Federal Plan to End HIV in America and how these relate to our Latino community. Thank you, Judith, and thank you to all the participants for your questions and comments. Once again, you can contact either Judy or me with your questions. The emails are on the screen right now. And with this, we finish the webinar. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you.
Órale, viva México.